And we'll keep going with Kian Isaac. Kian is a passionate AIC author and a lover of all things literature. His favorite genres include fantasy, horror, and classics, and I can definitely speak to that. He is particularly interested in studying the history of literature and enjoys writing young adult fantasy fiction, among many other genres. So here is his analysis of Percy Jackson versus Greek mythology. Take it away, Kian.
Thank you. So I wanted to talk about the research that Rick Riordan put into Percy Jackson. If you don't know who Riordan is, he is an author that primarily writes young adult fantasy and wrote a very popular series of books that centers around elements of Greek mythology. If you haven't read the Percy Jackson series, you definitely should, although I'm kind of about to spoil the first bit of it for you. As writers, we know that writing books, particularly fantasy books, requires a lot of research, and I wish I could ask Riordan himself about how much research he put into the books. However, I am not fortunate enough to be in his presence, and so I had to do my own research. My article focuses on a more modern view of Greek mythology because that is the view that Riordan uses, starting with the fact that I first discovered centaurs and satyrs used to be both classified as just satyrs, stating that they could either have the body of a horse or a goat in the Library of Greek Mythology by Apollodorus. In more modern narrations, there is a separate creature with the body of a horse, however, called centaurs. I started by rereading the first book, Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. Some people may think that it would have been easier to just watch the movies. However, I am not one of those people because the movies did not follow the books at all, and even Mr. Riordan himself said that he dislikes them. On Twitter, Riordan states that the entire movie should be censored, just 2 hours of blank screen. After fans asked him why the scene with the Lotus Eaters in the casino was censored on Disney's streaming service. He said, "To you guys, it's a couple hours of entertainment. To me, it's my life's work going through a meat grinder when I begged them not to do it." So I think it's safe to say that he was not happy with how they interpreted his story. The main characters in the books are Percy Jackson, who is the half-blood son of Greek god Poseidon. A half-blood child is the offspring of a human and a god. They can also be referred to as demigods. There is Annabeth, who is the half-blood daughter of Athena, the goddess of war and battle strategy, as well as wisdom. The third person to make up their main group of friends is Grover, who is a satyr. There are quite a few antagonists in the book, including Luke Castellan, who is the son of Hermes, who befriends Percy only to use him for his own plan to wage a war between the gods and then betray him later by framing him for stealing Zeus's lightning bolt and Hades' helm of darkness, which is where Hades' power comes from. This ultimately starts a war because Hades thinks that Percy stole the helm for Zeus, and Zeus thinks that Hades stole his lightning bolt. The three gods, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, also known as the Big Three, all made a pact to never reproduce with a human. Poseidon then broke that pact by having Percy, which caused some tension between them and an opening for Luke to create chaos in the future. Hades is the god of the underworld, where they have to go to get to Olympus and save Percy's mom to stop the war. The first character you meet in The Lightning Thief is Grover. Grover is classified as half human and half goat, known in Greek mythology as a satyr. Specifically, his top half is human and his bottom half is goat. In my own research, I came to find that satyrs are real. They had a thick tail and the lower half of their body was that of a goat. The Library of Greek Mythology by Apollodorus also states that they were usually ithyphallic, which means that, especially of a statue or other representation of a deity, they are shown as having an erect penis. That part makes no appearance in Riordan's books, but I'm sure that's only because it would not be an appropriate thing to put into a children's book. Next, I decided to look into one of my favorite elements of the book, the Lotus Eaters. The definition of what a Lotus Eater is similar in both portrayals of myth and fiction of the Percy Jackson universe, just executed a little differently. Outside of the Percy Jackson universe, in Odyssey 9, Lotus Eater denotes a person who spends their time indulging in pleasure and luxury rather than dealing with practical concerns. Lotus Eaters are instead simply people living on an island that contains a tree of unknown origin. This tree has fruit and flowers named lotus flowers, and when people eat these foods, it causes them to be sedated, apathic, and sleep peacefully. This primary food source was a narcotic, and after they ate the lotus, they would forget their home and their loved ones and only long to stay with their fellow lotus eaters. Those who ate the plant never cared to let anyone know where they were, nor return to their home. In Riordan's retelling, the lotus eaters are the people that get sucked into a hotel, and the video games inside the hotel are what suck them in. Percy, Annabeth, and Grover go to the hotel in search of a place to sleep and get sucked into the games themselves. When Percy notices that something feels off, he pulls himself out of the trance, and when he finally finds his friends, they all realize that they have been stuck in a hotel unknowingly for 5 days. When they talk to other people there, Lotus Eaters by definition, they see that different people have been staying at the hotel and playing those games unknowingly for multiple years, as many of them are from completely different time periods, which I think is crazy. The next character that I wanted to discuss is Medusa. You've probably heard of her. She's a powerful lady with hair of snakes that can turn people to stone. In Percy Jackson, Medusa makes her appearance as the owner of Auntie M's Emporium. Percy and his friends don't automatically know her to be Medusa, however, because she disguises herself with a veil to cover her face and hair of snakes. Grover ultimately is the person to uncover her real identity because he finds a statue of a satyr that looks like his uncle, and it turns out that it is. Medusa uses her eyes and hair to turn people who come into the Emporium into stone. Medusa in Greek mythology is described the same as in Riordan's book, with hair of snakes and a hideous face. However, she was not born that way. She was cursed to turn into a hideous monster because Poseidon, who could not resist temptation, impregnated her at the temple of Athena. Athena found out, and because she hated Poseidon over their battle for Athens, she cursed Medusa. It is said in every retelling of Medusa's origin story that her gaze was so piercing, the mere sight of her was sufficient enough to turn a man into stone. Her end came quickly when her head was severed by Perseus, which interestingly is where Percy's name comes from. Perseus then uses her head as a weapon, which still worked even though it was not attached to her body, before he sent her severed head to Athena. And the last thing that I talked about in my article was not a character, but rather Percy's prophecy. The prophecy is the central idea of the book. It's what guides the whole story. Percy's prophecy is as follows. You shall go west and face the god who has turned. You shall find what was stolen and see it safely returned. You shall be betrayed by one who calls you a friend, and you shall fail to save what matters most in the end. It foretells Percy's journey. You shall go west and face the god who has turned. This is when Percy, Grover, and Annabeth travel west over the United States to find the way to the underworld. Percy thinks that it is Hades who stole the bolt to get back at Zeus for banishing him to the underworld, turning him from good to evil, as it were. Next, the prophecy states, you shall find what was stolen and see it safely returned. This one may be self-explanatory, but I'm going to explain it anyway. The part of the prophecy refers to Zeus's lightning bolt. It is what was stolen, and it is up to Percy and his friends to see that it is returned to Zeus undamaged. The next line is, you shall be betrayed by one who calls you a friend. This line, this explanation only becomes evident as you read the book. Still, you may have already guessed from the beginning of this talk that this line foreshadows Luke Castellan's betrayal of Percy. Luke starts by getting close to Percy, and because Percy was not friends with anyone at the beginning, Luke, being the first person that he meets, he thinks that they're friends. Luke gives no indication that he will turn out to be the bad guy, and Percy does not even know until he realizes that the lightning bolt is in his backpack as part of Luke's plan to get Percy killed. The last line is, and you shall save what and you shall fail to save what matters most in the end. This is not referring to failing his quest to return the bolt to Zeus. In fact, they succeed in that quest, which means that the lightning bolt is not what matters most. The line refers to the fact that when they go to visit Hades in the underworld, they only have 3 of the pearls they need to get out of it, and subsequently have to leave Percy's mom behind because she, along with Percy, Annabeth, and Grover, make 4 people. The story does not end horribly, like you might be thinking. Hades, in fact, decides to return Percy's mother after he gets his Helm of Darkness back. All this long-winded explanation was to say that I wondered if prophecies had any place in history, not just in fiction. In Greek mythology, there are people who were deemed as oracles, and these oracles are said to be a gateway to knowing the will of the gods, a cosmic information superhighway for understanding what lay ahead. Individual cities and kings would come from across the ancient world to put their questions about their future plans to the Delphic oracle and wait to receive a response about what the gods thought of them. However, like the prophecies in Riordan's retelling, they are often worded ambiguously and can be interpreted differently by everyone who hears it. As if that weren't confusing enough, it is said that there were multiple oracles and each one of them would have a different answer to all the questions. So, in conclusion, I think it's pretty clear that Riordan puts a lot of research into his books, and the only fiction that are in them is the fine details that make up the story, the kids, and the journey they go on. Everything else he included was correctly taken from our history. And just as a quick final thought, I would like to mention that they are currently filming a Percy Jackson TV show, and Riordan himself is producing, so it should be much better than the movies, and I encourage all of you to check it out. Thank you for your time, and thanks for the opportunity.
Awesome. That was amazing, Kian. Thank you.
But my question for Kian was just so Percy Jackson is making use of these many different Greek myths, and it's obviously been quite some time since those myths were originated and the culture which they flourished in. So then, fast forwarding some 2,000 plus, even longer years, why is it that they sold so well? Like, I know that's a bit of a speculative question, but it's kind of like, why is it that people are relating to these books that are making such use of mythology from so long ago that it became a bestseller?
So yeah, you're completely correct. I would have to say that this is a very speculative question because I can only answer as to why I like the books or why I find them popular. I don't know, why anybody else would. I'm sure everyone has their own motivations for what they like and what they read and the kind of media that they consume. For me, I think it's just the fact that I don't know. I think it's just like a lot of fantasy is kind of a form of escapism for people, like, because it's so far away from the real world, uh, that, like, you can kind of get lost in it, but I think that Riordan sets it apart because, like, with The Hobbit, all of that stuff, is fiction, that none of that ever happened. But with Riordan's writing, everything is based in real world history. So you're kind of stuck between 2 places where you're in this fictional world of these fictional characters, but you can come back and, you know, you're this stuff actually happened. And I think it's really interesting for people who are not really research oriented to still learn about history in a more fun way.
Thank you.
That was very interesting. Um,